Mike Huckabee, the American ambassador to Israel, is in hot water after having a secret meeting in Jerusalem with an Israeli spy without the knowledge of the Trump administration. Mike Huckabee met with Jonathan Pollard, a Jewish supremacist American traitor who was sent to prison for sending state secrets to Israel. Mike Huckabee meeting with this scumbag should be considered treasonous behavior and should at least cost him his job in a sane society. Mike Huckabee and the MAGA Zionists that in the Trump administration don't even pretend they give a damn about anything other than Israel. Mike Huckabee even met with Bill Clinton decades ago in order to lobby for the release of Jonathan Pollard after he betrayed the United States and sold secrets to Israel. But you want to know what's wild? Even though Jonathan Pollard blatantly betrayed our country in order to provide secrets to Israel, according to the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, if you would accuse him of that, you would have been labeled an anti-Semite. And this insane IHRA definition of anti-Semitism was actually made into state law by Mike Huckabee's daughter, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who is the governor of Arkansas. This country is completely ran and controlled by Jewish supremacists. The United States and the American people truly have no sovereignty.
What's poppin'? My friends, my family, welcome back to Nick at Prime Time. You guys know I'm always in the live cooking, so I will get right into it because I want to do a follow-up segment to the Ukraine peace plan that has neocons in Washington, D.C. and Europe completely freaking out. And I remember when I covered this with Sarah, my friend at DD Geopolitics. She's always in the live cooking as well. I remember there was some optimism because Russia and Putin, they signaled that they appreciate the peace talks and agree with a lot of it. And what I should have found obvious when I covered this at first was, of course, Europe would try to do everything they can to screw this up. A war that they already lost. Like, the Europeans have no idea how cooked they are. Europe is a full-blown fascist state, arresting people for criticizing the genocide in Israel. You have around 33 plus people that are arrested in the UK every single day based on what they post on social media. Why don't progressives ever criticize Europe? Like, why does the Zoran Mamdani left always critique Venezuela and Cuba, but they never critique the fascism coming out of Germany and the UK? And they're doing everything to tank this peace deal. And how does continuing this war effort against Russia benefit the European people? You have the German economy that completely collapsed. Germany's time as a giant economic powerhouse and industrial powerhouse is over. They've been completely emasculated. And all these European politicians are still pushing for this war, despite the fact that every single one who has lost in devastating fashion in follow-up elections, because the only thing this have done is increase the cost of living for Europeans, completely harm the euro, which is why we see the Zelensky curse. I always like to show this. Because you all know we have another victim of the Zelensky curse. This was Denmark's, look, you had social democrats in Denmark who suffered sweeping election losses. These are the social democrats that the DSA left, the Zoran Mamdani left. They love Denmark. They are quick to condemn Venezuela. They are quick to condemn Cuba. They never lay a hand on European fascism. But then they always say, guys, we should model our leftism based on Denmark. Don't you know how happy they are that they get spoiled from their imperialism? I think most people can acknowledge, I think even most Marxists can understand that a capitalist welfare state is better than full-blown neoliberal fascism. But it's still a deeply evil state that is complicit with this capitalist structure that we as Marxists are trying to dismantle. Like Denmark, Norway, Sweden, they should be warnings to socialist movements. But they, like the NATO left, they are in line with these people. The social and Europe has made them pay for it. European Green parties all over the world have lost also their credibility by selling their people out to NATO. I love how this one is updated to include Kamala Harris. Let's go. So explain, why is Europe so obsessed with keeping this war effort going? Not only is it catastrophic for them in terms of geopolitics, EU is being separated from India and China. This is straining relationships between India and the United States. You have Brazil that is harshly critical of the United States, a giant partner in the Western Hemisphere. How do they possibly benefit from this? It would be one thing if this was a political slam dunk, but it's not. This has destroyed the liberal parties in Europe. And then I see like think pieces talk about this. They talk about the rise of the far right in Europe. The rise of the far right is enabled by the failure of liberal governance. And let me temper my shit liberty down a little bit. Because let's be clear. Like if you're part of the NATO war machine who support the banderites in Ukraine, what's really the difference between someone on the far right and some neoliberal Ursula von der Leyen type who supports the genocide of the Palestinians? So I apologize for my shit liberty for a second because I don't even like using those terms. Like, what do you mean far right? You all capitalists. You guys are all imperialists. You know what I mean? What's popping, my brother James Starks, man? I got to hang out with the homie, the Black Panther homie James Starks. What's popping, my man? Good to see you in the chat. Yeah, make sure you guys support us on Patreon. This is a live stream, by the way. We are live on Twitch, on X, on Kick. If you're on the RBN side, you might well start switching over to my personal channel. I had a banger conversation with Jody Barr yesterday on Sunday, and I'm gonna be doing more of those weekend shows so we can bring more of our international comrades on, because Jody is a complete intellectual powerhouse, man. Like Jody is so good. Like she motivates me to be better in my analysis on things, on my Marxist analysis and my theory. Like she's a true example of us all, for us all. So if you haven't seen it, make sure you guys check out the episode I did yesterday. Look at it. Disarray over leaked U.S.-Russia peace plan is the ideal scenario for Putin. Isn't it interesting how peace always benefits the enemies of the West? Ukraine has been cornered into weighing terms it cannot possibly accept and faces threat of losing its most important ally. I think they are talking about the United States. Because Trump, I want to show you guys this because I didn't have time to break this down. I want to show you guys more neocon tears. The United States and the West is the most, like the United States in particular, is the most propagandized country in the world. If someone was to mention the UK, I'm not going to fight them. Like, if you want to bring up the BBC, which is essentially owned by Jewish supremacists, I'm not going to fight you. If you want to bring up Israel, I'm not going to fight you either. Let's call them 1A, 1B, 1C, but I got hand to the United States because the UK propaganda is not as sophisticated. Israeli propaganda is a joke. Like, it's only United States propaganda that has brainwashed the world. Or I should say, Westerners, European chauvinists. I'm gonna show you guys some liberal panic. Let's break down some propaganda here. This is CNN covering how peace in Ukraine is like the worst thing ever, and Trump is selling out the Ukrainian people. Bro, the post you have seen from the blue and yellow Twitter, blue and yellow social media has been completely unhinged. Like, bro, there are hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian men that are fleeing your country, and you guys don't want to end this. Europe is pretending that Ukraine is an existential threat. Why does Ukraine have to be part of NATO? It makes 100% sense to me for Ukraine to be a buffer state. But anyway, let's play this video and I want to react to it a little bit.
Top officials from the US, Ukraine, Europe, they're meeting in Geneva, Switzerland today, and they're talking about how to end Russia's war on Ukraine. Now, at the G20 in South Africa, Ukraine's allies are simultaneously working on a unified response to President Trump's 28-point peace plan, and it's been widely criticized as pro-Russia.
There's no illusion of neutral news in these neoliberal networks. Not even pretending to be neutral, not even pretending to be objective. Oh my God, we can't have peace in Ukraine. That would benefit Putin. We need for never-ending war. Because what are you guys suggesting? Never-ending nuclear war? And look at this sellout Negro here. What has Russia ever done to black people to make it so you want to spend billions of dollars that can go to modernizing our infrastructure towards providing healthcare to our people? You guys know that black people suffer by far the highest percentage of medical debt on any group in this country. Meanwhile, this cornball neoliberal is melting down at the idea of us not sending taxpayer money to neo-Nazis in Ukraine who call black organizers in Ukraine monkeys and N-words. Guys, the black people you see on CNN, they're like the most shameless sellouts. Like the Abby Phillips, this guy here. The Van Jones. Like people are freaking out about Van Jones, but Van Jones is the average black liberal. You know what I mean? He's not anything different than any of these insane psychopaths like Bakari Sellers and this guy here, apparently. But anyway, let's continue. Let's see the dismay in his voice. Oh my God, there's gonna be peace in Ukraine. That will obviously help the Russian state. Wouldn't it benefit us too to normalize relation with Russia and economically empower both our countries and lower energy costs in Europe? If you end Russian sanctions and Europe develops a friendly relationship with Russia where you can drastically lower the cost of energy and essentially end this energy crisis that Europe is going through, why are you guys paying it as this peace proposal only benefits one side when it benefits literally everyone?
Ukraine's allies are
the neocon class that is making bank on this war, which is what it's all about.
Simultaneously working on a unified response to President Trump's 28-point peace plan, and it's been widely criticized as pro-Russia.
If Ukraine loses this war and possibly collapses, it will have an impact on European politics as a whole, on the entire European continent. And that is why we are so committed to this issue. Because if there's a chance to bring about peace, it will also have an impact on the entire European continent.
And President Trump now insists that the 28-point plan is not his final offer. And Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, they're expected to join today's talks in Switzerland. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky will meet with President Trump before Thanksgiving. And Zelensky has called this moment one of the most difficult in his country's history. We get more now from CNN's Kevin Liptak.
Good morning, Victor. An intensive stretch of diplomacy is now underway before President Trump's Thursday deadline for Ukraine to agree to this 28-point plan for ending the war. An American delegation composed of the Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, the American Secretary of State Marco Rubio, now in Switzerland ahead of meetings with Ukrainian officials who hope to put their imprint on this plan. And we understand that meetings with Russian officials will happen shortly thereafter. President Trump said on Saturday that this plan was not his final offer. And I think that will be reassuring in some ways to those who view this 28.
There it is. That's the red flag we should all be aware of, and how Trump is doing the bidding of the NATO establishment by pushing Russia and even bothering to consider the opinions of the irrelevant EU when they lost this conflict. So we've seen Trump do this his entire second term. which is why the Ukraine conflict haven't ended. He said he will propose a peace deal, which would clearly violate the very reasonable red lines that Russia has, like no security guarantees for Ukraine, no European military presence in Ukraine, because that is what started this conflict in the first place. Russia, and I think it's reasonable, they don't want the genocidal West at their back door. These are just examples of things that Trump and his team would do to undermine the peace concept. Now Trump is saying that this is not a final draft, and we already seen them being enrolled by the EU and by the neocons in the media and folding to their framing of this issue, saying that they conceded to Russia and Putin. So don't believe that Trump is some peacemaker. I believe that this is designed to help sell the war and make Putin seem unreasonable by putting up peace proposals you know not going to pass. So you take demands from the European side and you take demands from the Ukraine side and you pretend that they are equal in a same relative stature to the Russian demands when they're not. You guys lost, by the way. You have no right to be saying these demands, especially when you hear the counter proposals that Europe put up. Like, this here is a complete joke. And this is how you know that Europe has plans to wage war against Russia forever. One thing that this is how you know they're not serious. Like, you just look at number 10, for example. Ukraine receives robust, legally binding security guarantees, including from the United States, an Article 5-like agreement to prevent future aggression. This is how you know they're not serious. Look, I can't. It's hard to see it like this. Let me do this. I'm gonna open this in a new tab. I think it'd be easier to see this way. Yeah, let's do it like this. Here's the list of all the demands. Like number 10, that's automatically a no deal for Russia. So that's them trying to provoke a negative response by Putin. Then you look at 13, Ukraine's membership in NATO depends on the consensus within the alliance. We're right back at square one. When have you ever seen in the history of humanity a country that is a victim of war, that is so desperate to prevent any sort of peace plan? You have the Palestinians, one of the most historically wrong people of all time, who was just a victim of a brutal genocide. It's still a victim, I should say, of a brutal genocide. You have Israel engaging in terrorism in the West Bank, building settlements and stealing Palestinian land. But despite all the aggressive and heinous crimes that the Israeli state commits against the Palestinians, you still see people in Gaza cheering for ceasefires. You see the Palestinian side making deals with the devil, even though they know they won't oppose ceasefire, just for a little bit of breath, a little bit of breathing space. The Palestinians, who have not only just a legal right to fight, but every single moral right to fight against their criminal occupiers, they cheer on peace deals. Look at all the ceasefires that happened this year, even the fake ones, the ones that we criticize on our show. Every single time there was a peace deal proposal, there was Palestinian children, just Palestinians in general, I would say, that was celebrating in the streets. Meanwhile, Ukraine, who has lost an entire generation of men, whose economy is in shambles, the demographics forever ruined, doing everything they can to prevent peace, even though the majority of Ukrainian people keep saying that they want peace and they want a peace deal. I don't have time to read all these, but it's just straight out delusional. Territory. Why would Russia negotiate with territory? Like, you see, they talk about territorial negotiations. Why would they do that when you guys been utterly folded on the battlefield and people in denial about this? You guys know they have these soldier swaps. Like whenever there's dead Ukrainians versus dead Russians. You guys know the ratio between these is around 50-1. They just had a swapping of the dead when it was like 50 dead Ukrainian soldiers, only one Russian soldier. Bro, they were getting demolished. What do you think you have the right to ask about any of these things? Especially in counter to the country that is trying to bail you out. People who try and bail you out. Look, is the EU already trying to sabotage new Ukrainian peace plan? Of course they are. Of course they are. I don't know how anyone who considers themselves part of the NATO left even defends this nonsense. Like, not only is Ukraine a fascist state that bans collective bargaining, bans socialist parties, you guys are defending the concept of never-ending war? A war that greatly boosted the defense contractors' profits? You have people that say, we got to stand up against the corporate Democrats. I saw a tweet. I didn't want to call them out. Damn, I wish I'd say this tweet, but they're like, man, we got to stand up against the corporate Democrats. You have DSA people who still talk about corporate Democrats. What is a corporate Democrat? Because you guys realize that Bernie Sanders and the NATO left, their votes are directly responsible for a boom in profits of the military-industrial complex. So how isn't Bernie part of the corporate wing when he has votes that directly lead to the profits of corporations? Do progressives realize that the military-industrial complex is made up of corporations too? So if you're voting for NATO, if you support NATO, you are part of the so-called corporate wing of the Democratic Party. Look, Marianne Wilson, the NATO left, still at it again. I have my great guest. I'm gonna bring Sean McCarthy in very soon. Amazing writer. He covered geopolitics as well. I'm very interested in getting his thoughts on the Ukraine peace proposal. So Sean will bring you in here very soon. Looking forward to getting his thoughts on this. But here's Marianne Wilson. You guys know the same people who is propping up Zohran Mamdani are the same people who propped up Maxwell Frost, who sold out the Palestinian people, are the same people who propped up John Fetterman. I'm talking about the crystal balls. I call out people with bigger platforms. I don't want to call out people who like don't got. I see a lot of dumb shit, but talk about the people with a platform, like crystal ball. You know what I mean? The TYT left. Marianne Williamson, John Fetterman. Now they all taking the L on Zohran. At what point do these people start to lose all credibility? Because here is Marianne Williamson, a part of the NATO left, who's upset, just like the neocon class. Not that anyone should be surprised, but the betrayal of Ukraine and gift to Putin inherent in the U.S. peace plan is sickening. Marianne Williamson believes that the U.S. peace plan with Ukraine is sickening. And this is the person that the entirety of the DSA left, progressive left, went to support as president. And now they're surprised they fell for it again. Now you have Zionist Zohran Mamdani endorsing Hakeem Jeffries and filling up his cabinet with a bunch of neoliberals. And look at the mindset here. The betrayal of Ukraine? Fam, we don't owe Ukraine shit. We owe the working class everything. The working class in the United States. Ukraine is not an ally of ours. They're not NATO. That's why we're fighting this war in the first place. We're fighting this war in the first place because Russia is looking at the West like, hey, motherfucker, that is our neighbor. That is not your fucking military ally. And you guys know I dismantled Ro Khanna on this issue. I took his doctorate degree, and I want to debate, and I will destroy any single fucking leftist who want to legitimize the idea that we should be funding the military-industrial complex that is waging war in Ukraine in order to test military weapons. These are things that NATO officials officially say. Yeah, well, this war actually benefits us because we get to test battlefield innovations and new drone technologies. Imagine being on the progressive left and defending that nonsense. And the people who support her, they will never reflect. You know, that what annoys me. Like, I've made mistakes in the past, but there's no reflection. You're going to continue to do the same thing over and over again. Because here, Marianne, like, now they're willing to call her out. Yeah. I wish I had a chance. Because I had, Marianne Wilson, she rage quit our conversation because I called her a Zionist. Remember? I called her a Zionist. That video blew up. And then all the progressive bread tubers at the time. Like, we had Vosh that went after me. We had Hassan. We had everyone that was like, how dare you call Marianne Wilson a Zionist? Because they had no idea what a fucking Zionist was back then. Remember, that was before the genocide. That was pre-October 7th. Oh, yeah, we got some new viewers, bro. If you haven't seen that, bro, you don't have to watch all our old live streams. But if you're a new viewer and you haven't seen that one, like, that is the one I'll put on top of the list of must-sees. My dismantling of Marianne Williamson, Ro Khanna, especially Ro Khanna on this issue, because Ro Khanna, I actually had a chance to talk about Ukraine. I was sad that Marianne Williamson rage quit before I even had a chance to destroy her on this issue. But here is Marianne Williamson supporting the Zionist propaganda attack against pro-Palestinian protesters who rightfully are protesting this synagogue in New York that is actively fundraising for the genocidal state of Israel and recruiting Jews to be settlers, to become criminal settlers in Palestine. We covered, unlike many people who are afraid to call out this problem, how over 99% of synagogues in the United States are explicitly Zionist and are supportive of the state of Israel. Only 0.7%, less than 1% of all synagogues in the United States are explicitly anti-Zionist. So synagogues are fair target for protests, the same way that a Catholic church will be fair target for a protest if they were supporting anti-choice policies. So why is it okay to protest a church who opposes gay marriage, a church that opposes abortion? That is fair target the same way these synagogues are. And this will be the last thing I still got a lot to cover on this, but I won't bring my guest in. This is going to be a Ukraine Power Hour show. Like, what else do I have here on my list? I know we've been covering a lot, guys. I'll make it to that too. Oh yeah, I got covered the poll about young Republicans turning on Israel, so we'll get to that. We will cover how the DHS was caught, like, being stationed out of Tel Aviv. We see what we get to, but this is going to be a heavy Ukraine episode because we got a lot of updates. Why does the NATO left never bring this up? This is why I brought to Ro Khanna. You said, I support the right to self-determination. That's what he said. I was like, why do you support Ukraine fighting against Russia, but you don't support Hamas fighting against Israel? And that was the exact moment I revoked his doctorate degree. Because he didn't have an answer. Oh, I support the self-determination of people. Do you though? Because no one in the NATO left covered how there was referendums in the Donbass and Luhansk region where they overwhelmingly voted to be part of Russia. Why would that be? I don't know. Maybe because the Zelensky regime banned the Russian language? Maybe because the Zelensky regime banned the right to collective bargain? Stripped unions of their rights? You know, things that Russians hold dearly? That they fought and died for during the age of the USSR? Zelensky banning any sort of opposition. So you see this fascist government take fruit. Wouldn't you vote on a referendum to be part of Russia, you know, a country that has paid maternity leave, that provide healthcare to their citizens, that actually have worker standards? Will you want to be part of Russia or fascist Banderite Ukraine? I'm asking you in the audience. I think if you're on the left, the answer to that should be obvious. I wouldn't say that. I don't want to make it about politics. I think if you're anywhere left of fucking George W. Bush you should fucking choose to be part of Russia over Ukraine. And that's what the ethnic Russians in Luhansk and Donbass did. In the response to this, the Ukrainian government shelled and killed over 10,000 ethnic Russians. And people on the NATO left pretend this is not a thing. All right. But actually, I want to hear our guests. I'm going to end the RBN part of the stream. But I'll still be streaming on my personal YouTube page. We're also still on Twitch. You know, our biggest audience is on X. You guys know things be popping on X. So we're still going. I want to bring my